Why am I at this house today? The answer is this quadcopter here. This is the GEPRC Cinelog35 V2, the second generation of GEPRC Cinelog Cinewhoop. And when GEPRC sent it to me for review, I thought, I never get out and do what Cinewhoops are actually really good at, things like real estate house fly-throughs. So I reached out to a person that I know who's a realtor and said, you got a house I can fly through? And he hooked me up. So that's what we're gonna do in this video. I'm gonna take you through the process of performing a real estate house fly-through with this quadcopter. And although this isn't gonna be like a full review of this quadcopter like I usually do, we're gonna see what kind of results it turns out. And we're gonna use both GEPRC's naked Hero 11 and the O3 Air unit to record the fly-through, and we're gonna compare the footage and see which one is better. Is the O3 good enough? Is the Cinelog35 good enough? We're gonna find out. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're gonna learn something today. The GEPRC Cinelog has been the favorite Cinewhoop of many professionals working in the industry today. With the V2 of the Cinelog35, GEPRC have made a couple of small improvements. First of all, these aluminum brackets here hold the battery strap and make it super easy to route the battery strap. Normally you would have to pass it down through this slot, across, and then back up through this slot, which is it's a real pain in the butt without just taking the whole thing apart. It's really nice to be able to put this battery strap in place and have it hold the battery. We do have battery pads front and rear so that as the battery gets cinched down, it'll hopefully mostly stay in place. And the battery straps that they provide have rubberized weave in them to help keep everything together. In addition, GEPRC have added a cutout here so that you can easily access, well, relatively easily access the SD card and USB port on the O3 Air unit. You used to have to actually take the bottom and drop the Air unit out. Well, the V1 of this frame came out before the O3, so this is an adaptation to the use of the O3, but it's a standard for all of the video transmitters that this quad comes with. By the way, GEPRC sells this quad with the O3, which is what we're using in this video, but you can also buy it with the RunCam Link. You can also buy it with a walk-style video transmitter, and you can buy it with an analog video transmitter if you prefer. Very nice to see them supporting multiple video transmitters. The main reason that this Cinelog is using 3.5-inch props instead of 3-inch props is that it's designed to carry larger batteries and heavier cameras. You can put a 1300 milliamp hour 6S on this. That's a big honking battery, over 200 grams. And you can put a full-size GoPro on this. That's another 125-ish something grams. Your flight time is going to be really bad, but you can do it if you need to. We're not going to be doing that, though, because we want to have longer flight times. We want to be able to try to get a one take through this house, a single take through the whole house with no mistakes. Spoiler, I didn't pull that off. The camera that we're going to be using is the GEPRC Naked GoPro Hero 11. And you can see here that it is much thinner and lighter than a actual GoPro Hero 11. But in case you're not familiar with how naked GoPros work, this is not a copy or clone Hero 11 made by GEPRC. This is a legitimate GoPro Hero 11 that GEPRC have ripped the guts out of. And they've taken off a whole bunch of stuff and they left just the essential bits to make a full-featured GoPro Hero 11 that is much thinner and lighter and less durable, and actually missing a feature or two compared to a full GoPro Hero 11. In terms of image quality, it's got everything. It's got all the original parts from the GoPro Hero 11, records in the same resolutions, and has those same capabilities. It does have Wi-Fi capability for configuration, but what it doesn't have is the rear touchscreen. So the only way to interact with this camera is via the Bluetooth app, via the GoPro app, or it ships with GoPro Labs firmware, which adds some capabilities that pros might want to use. But one of the things that it adds is the ability to use QR codes to configure the camera. And in fact, that's important because as far as I know, the only way to put the camera into Bluetooth pairing mode and pair it with your app is via that QR code. I'll put a link to that QR code down in the video description below if you need to pair this camera. Maybe there's another secret button push, but I couldn't find it. One of the big challenges with a naked GoPro is how you're going to power it. And the GEPRC Naked Hero 11 comes with both a 6S and a 4S version of this balance adapter. Now, I was pretty skeptical when I first saw this because it doesn't actually have like a voltage regulator on it. Like, hang on, I have one right here, actually. This is the iFlight version of the same cable. It plugs into a battery's balance connector and it outputs 5 volts via USB. And you can see here, it has an actual little like voltage regulator on board. And that's good because just plugging into the balance lead of a battery can result in voltage spikes that in some cases fries, like the GoPro Hero 10 Bones. You're not supposed to use a plug like this to power it because it can fry them. People do and they get away with it, but it's not a good idea. But GEPRC ships theirs with this cable, so I will be using it. And there we go. And the Hero 11 turns on, and oh my God, it has a front screen. It has the front screen. This is the first time I've seen personally a naked GoPro with a front screen on it. I'm sure that you're going to tell me in the comments that someone did it before and I just missed it because I'm out of the loop. This is so nice. One of the biggest limitations of these naked GoPros is the inability to easily see the framing of the shot. I can see exactly how the camera is being aimed. I can see the white balance. If I've got the white balance wrong, if the exposure is wrong, I can see all of this stuff easily. Normally what I would have to do is pull out my phone, connect it to the Wi-Fi of the camera, and then look at my phone and do all that stuff. And that's a bit of a hassle. It is so much easier and nicer to have a screen on the front. Now you may have noticed that when I powered the camera on, you heard a fan start. And that's another cool thing GEPRC have done with this naked GoPro. You can see there that there's actually a fan on the rear, and that solves another problem that naked GoPros have had, especially the Hero 10 and up, which is that they overheat if you run them for a long time. We're going to see how this one holds up to the treatment I give it. I think we can come in through the front door. That's going to really highlight this nice view here of the spiral split. And I think it makes sense to go up to the main floor instead of down to the basement first. Yep. We'll make a left and we'll come through here. We can pass right under these lights so they go overhead nice and tight. Then the other thing we could do is we could come out of the kitchen. Instead of going straight to the pool, we could come out of the kitchen and come down this hallway. So what if we then use that as an excuse to go outside, and we can go around to the back and then into this room, into the suite. We'll come this way focused on the fireplace, and then a big reveal out the driveway. I would like to do it in one shot. We'll see if we get it, but I'm gonna try to do it in one shot. Okay, we'll come out here. The place where we might need to cut the shot is transitioning to the outside because the light's gonna be so different. Oh, yeah. But we'll see what we can do. Now that we've got the route planned out, the next thing to do is to set the settings on the GoPro and the O3 to get the best possible results. And no, we're not just going to put everything in auto and let the camera take care of it. We're going to try to be professionals here. And the first thing I want you to notice is that I do not have a preview from the camera. The way that GoPros work is that the configuration of the camera is done via Bluetooth, and the preview window, which requires more throughput, is done over Wi-Fi. I have never got preview to work on this camera, and I assume that means that it just doesn't have working Wi-Fi. Thank goodness that the camera does have a front screen so we can see the framing and so forth. Otherwise, we would kind of be screwed. The first setting let's look at is resolution, and the resolution I chose was 5.3K 8:7 aspect ratio. Let me show you why I chose the 8:7 aspect ratio using this front screen. And what I want you to see is that if I switch to 5.3K, now we have a 16:9 widescreen image. But the GoPro's internal sensor is actually 8:7. It's the full square that you see here. So even if I choose 4:3, there is still some slicing off of the top and bottom of the sensor. By choosing to use the full 8:7 resolution, what we're doing is we're giving the maximum amount of field of view to the stabilization program for it to work with. So for example, here is a raw image coming out of the GoPro with no stabilization applied. This is the full field of view that the GoPro is capable of capturing. If I turn stabilization on, then two things will happen. Number one, it'll get zoomed in on, and number two, it changes automatically to a 16:9 widescreen aspect ratio. But hang on, let's turn that back to the full frame 8:7. And one of the things you're going to see is that there is some lens correction being applied. That's why we've got this black at the bottom of the image. And that lens correction is trying to fix the warping. Here's what the image originally looked like. Do you see it's kind of got some fisheye? They're trying to fix the warping and straighten it out and make it look a little bit more natural. And we're able to do that without cutting into the main part of the image because we shot in that 8:7 aspect ratio. Once we go to widescreen, those black areas at the top and the bottom are gone. The other thing we can do is we can turn the smoothness down. If I turn this all the way down to 0, we're basically disabling the stabilization. And if I hit apply, you will see the effect of that is that the image zooms out just a little bit. The exact amount of zoom is going to depend on how much stabilization is being applied and how fast the quadcopter is moving. GyroFlow gives us an even cooler view of the stabilization process by showing you this stabilized viewport in the center of the screen and then showing the full image that was captured by the camera outside of that. And we can see just how much it's zooming in and just how it's sort of sliding the image around to hold the stabilization. This really gives us some flexibility. For example, if I say, oh, well, it's really zoomed in way too much, I could just back this smoothness off a little bit and it'll zoom out and I can just tweak that. And of course, you can do that with Real Steady Go with the GoPro player, but you just don't have as much visibility and as much control. As far as frames per second goes, I chose 30 frames per second. And some people might ask, wouldn't you rather use a lower resolution and a higher frames per second, like 60 or even 120 frames per second? Because that gives you the flexibility to slow down the footage and have enough frames to not have the quality of the video be reduced. But the truth is that you very, very seldom slow down a real estate fly-through. You almost always speed them up. And so 30 frames per second is going to be fine. I will say, though, this is Joshua in the future. I've already edited this. I will say that there were times when I sped it up where it got a little jittery and it seemed like if I sped it up by 2x, then everything was fine. But if I sped it up by like 1.37x, because that was exactly the right speed to make the move last as long as I wanted it to move, sometimes it looked a little jittery and I wished maybe I had done 60 FPS. But I'm not sure it's worth giving up the 5.7K 8.7 resolution to get that. We're going to have Hyper Smooth turned off and we're going to do all our stabilization in post. We're going to do it in Real Steady Go or GyroFlow on the computer. There's no reason to have the camera adding stabilization to it. We want to be able to tweak that after the fact. If your camera has the ability to do 10-bit, you definitely want that on. That's going to give you more control when doing color grading later. Speaking of color grading, you also want the color set to flat, which is again going to give you the maximum amount of control in the color grading later. If you don't intend to color grade, then choose natural or God forbid vivid. But if you're doing a real estate fly through, you probably are going to want to color grade that because you'll get the best possible results. You might be tempted to lock the shutter speed and lock your exposure, but I don't suggest you do that because you're usually going to encounter bright and dark areas, like you're going to be outside the house and then fly into the house. And the camera is going to need to be able to adjust its exposure. Personally, I would recommend leaving the shutter speed at auto, and then I recommend adjusting the ISO min and max to control the exposure. The ISO min should always be 100, just to let the camera stop down as much as it needs to in bright areas, and the ISO max should be set based on how dark the darkest room you're going to be flying through is. You want to keep that ISO max as low as possible because you're going to get above about ISO 400. The quality of the video is going to be significantly reduced. But if it's just too dark in the darkest room, you might want to open that up just a little bit. And as far as white balance goes, actually, let me show you how I determine the correct white balance. This is a more complicated picture than it might seem. One of the challenges of a shoot like this is that we do not completely control the lighting. This isn't a photography studio, this is just somebody's house. So we've got exterior lighting coming in from the sun, we've got these LED bulbs on the interior, but some of the bulbs aren't the same color temperature as the others. So I've got this gray card, and I've got this app on my phone which can tell me the color temperature of our light. And if I just point it at this gray card while letting this light fall on it, we can see that our color temperature here is about 5,000 Kelvin. But if I come over to this window and let the sunlight fall on the color card, we get a color temperature of, oh boy, that's great news, about 5,000 Kelvin. That's good. Our color temperature is matching. That's going to make our job easier, or it's going to make the colorist's job easier. On the other hand, here in the kitchen, the lights are redder. And we're not gonna change the color temperature or the color grade that you're seeing right now, so you can see the effect that this is having on my footage. If we look at the phone, we can see the color temperature in here is 3400 Kelvin. It's much warmer. And I'm not sure what the best way to handle this is gonna be. You see, we could let the camera automatically adjust its color temperature as we fly around. But that's gonna provide inconsistent results. It's gonna provide a moving target, and the colorist is gonna find it really hard to work around that. Probably the right thing to do is gonna be to lock the white balance at 5000 Kelvin, and then when we fly through the kitchen, the colorist is gonna have to work hard to fix the colors, but at least everything will be stable and stationary, and that'll give him, it won't be just constantly moving as we fly around. For the O3 Air unit, we're gonna use basically the same principles to set the camera up, but the available settings aren't gonna be quite the same. Here in the O3's settings menu, we can go to Camera, and we can see most, but not all of the settings we're going to be concerned with. The first setting is going to be the aspect ratio, and we are going to be setting that to 4:3, again, in order to give the widest possible field of view for the stabilization software to work with. For video quality, you may be surprised to see that I am recording at 2.7K and not 4K resolution. The O3 is capable of 4K, and you would think that 4K would give better image quality. But when the O3 is set to 4K, it can only do 16:9 widescreen. And to my mind, it seems like I'm going to get better results by recording in 4:3, widest field of view possible, and then going over to the desktop and using gyroflow to stabilize the image, as opposed to recording in 4K and having the O3 stabilize the image. I just don't like the idea that the O3's built-in stabilization is maybe going to do something I don't like, and I'm not going to be able to change it after the fact. As far as the frame rate goes, I originally tried using 2.7K 30. And the reason I did that is that, like I discussed earlier, 30 frames per second is probably plenty for what we're doing, and a slower frame rate will give better low light sensitivity. The O3 is not known for its low light sensitivity, and we are indoors in a relatively dark environment, at least compared to flying outdoors in the sun. Unfortunately, the latency of the 2.7K 30, I don't know what the number is, but it was almost unflyable to me at 30 frames per second, especially in the tight indoor environment of the house. I tried going up to 60. It was still difficult to fly. Only at 2.7K 100 did I feel confident flying it in the house. So that means these images are going to be darker and or run at a higher ISO and grainier than they would otherwise need to be. Maybe you're a better pilot than me and you can fly at the lower frame rate. I totally recommend you do that if you can. For field of view, I set it to the widest possible, wide. Ultra wide is not available when using 4:3, at least it's not available. I assume it's because we're using 4:3. Image stabilization is turned off because, like I said, I want to do it myself on the desktop. And the ISO limit I have left at the maximum. Now, a lot of people would say that you should set your ISO to a lower number to keep the image from getting grainy. But the O3 is not very light sensitive, and I would rather have a grainy image with some image noise in it than a dark image that's basically unusable. So I'm going to let it go all the way up to 6400 if that's what it wants to do. Next, we're going to go down to advanced camera settings, and we're going to make sure we're recording in the Cinelike color. This is the flat color profile that will give the maximum flexibility to color grade this in post. If you don't intend to color grade it in post, you could use normal color. There's one more setting we need to get at, and it's not in that menu. It's in the secret camera menu that I didn't know about for the longest time. To get at that menu, you're going to swipe up on the touchpad, and it'll come up like this. And yes, here we can change the white balance, and we can lock the white balance. And we're going to set that white balance the same as we did the GoPro, whatever that was. I don't remember. Okay, we've got our camera set up. We've got our route planned out. The only thing left to do is for me to fly the damn thing and actually deliver the footage that the client requested. And I'm going to do that just as soon as I tell you about my Patreon. Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me. If you value the content that I'm doing here, if I entertain you, if I educate you, if I help you make better buying decisions, or for any reason you feel gratitude for the work I'm doing here and want it to continue, the single best way you can support me is by joining my Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, $2 a month, you can make sure I can keep doing my job. That's the bottom line. You get access to my Discord server, which is full of friendly, helpful people. You get access to podcast downloads of my live streams. That's about it. I help everybody for free. I make these videos. I put them out there for free. I don't make a big deal out of it. And I hope that someday you will go, okay, today's the day. I will support him. If today is that day, there's a link in the video description to my Patreon. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Away we go. Next thing I got to do is find some place where I'm going to stand, where I'm not going to be in the shot, because you don't want to see the drone guy in your nice real estate fly-through. And I think this closet's going to be perfect. I'm going to go stand in the closet, and I'm going to do some test flights around the area just to make sure I'm not going to get any surprises where I lose video. I think I'm going to be okay. All right, so we'll start with our establishing shot of the house. Did we decide, where did we, fuck, I lost track of my route. We go out here, we go down here, we're gonna go up here, we'll go through here, nice shot of the pool, we're gonna go in the back door. Getting some bobbles in this hallway because it's so tight. I don't like that move at all. I think like one more and I'll have it. I think like one more and I'm gonna have it. Dang. Well, maybe one more. This one is gonna be the perfect one. Well, there we go. That's gonna do it. We're gonna need to just figure it out from here. Before I show you the final edit of my very first real estate fly-through, I want to take a second to show you the raw footage that came straight out of the camera, because I've done everything I can to make the final footage look as good as possible with a color grade and adjusting the exposure and everything. And if you're trying to decide whether you need a GoPro for this kind of work or whether the O3 is good enough, I think you want to see the raw footage that came out of the camera, not just the prettied up stuff. So here is a camera, and here is a different camera. And this is not the raw footage. This is with the color grade and the filters applied. Here is the raw footage. So this is the GoPro, and this is the DJI O3. And we can immediately start to see some differences in the character of this image, specifically in the color science. It's very clear that, well, first of all, we can definitely see the additional resolution of the GoPro. If we just look at the blades of grass, there's just a lot more resolution there. And in addition, there's just like a difference in the color. It's like there's more shades of green in the grass, whereas when we go to the DJI, there's just like green. In terms of exposure, I chose this frame because it's relatively dark under the door here, and we can see that both the DJI and the GoPro are having trouble getting all that detail. Bear in mind, though, that the DJI was allowed to go all the way up to ISO 6400, whereas the GoPro was locked at ISO 200, so the GoPro could still be doing a better job. If we put the color grade back on, here is the result that the editor came up with. It seems that he was struggling a little bit with the greens under here. And here's the GoPro. Once again, the GoPro is just a much, much nicer image. We can see little sort of speckly noise here in the shadow. That's the difference in the sensor and the image quality of the GoPro versus the DJI. And the GoPro, there's a little bit of noise there, but just overall, just a much better looking image. That difference in resolution is also really more apparent than I guessed it would be. Here we're looking at the raw footage of the DJI, and I don't know why this is so blurry. It's not motion blur because it's blurry in all the frames, and it's not blurry in the direction that I'm moving. It's just kind of lacking resolution. If we look at the GoPro, we can see much better results. Some motion blur around the edges where the wide angle lens is accentuating the motion, but overall everything is in focus. If we turn the filters back on, here is the final color grade, and likewise for the DJI. Oof! You see a lot of speckling here in the shadows. The DJI is cranking the ISO up to deal with the lack of light, and the GoPro isn't having to do that. Okay, it's time to show you the final result. And I think we'll start with the probably better looking version, the GoPro version. There's no doubt that the GoPro can deliver results that the O3 can't deliver. I don't think that was ever in question. The GoPro can record at higher resolution. It has a larger sensor. It has all kinds of capabilities that the O3 doesn't. But what it also has is significant additional weight and cost. And so the question for this video was never, is the O3 better than the GoPro? It was never going to be better than the GoPro. The question was always, is the result from the O3 good enough? And in order to answer that question, let's switch now to the O3 fly-through. And the specific answer to that question is really going to depend on your priorities. But I think for a lot of people, the answer to that, at least based on my results, is going to be no. The results are just not up to the standards that I would hold myself to if I was putting myself out as a professional, recording this stuff for realtors who were trying to sell houses, which is a little bit weird and makes me wonder if I screwed up somehow. Because I've seen other people show results of real estate fly-throughs with the O3 that I thought looked pretty good and pretty close to the GoPro. Maybe their house was better lit than mine was. Like this was just like I showed up one day and was like, we'll give it a go. And the O3 specifically is worse in areas where there's worse lighting. But even in areas where there was better lighting, like outside, the color of the O3 simply cannot match the color of the GoPro. And to me, at least, that would be a deal breaker. I personally, if I was doing this work as a pro, would always want to have the raw footage from the GoPro to give me the best possible results. And that's true because the GoPro is technologically superior. And it's also true because I don't have to fly my quad through the GoPro. I firmly believe that I would rather have a high quality, high definition camera recording final footage and a separate high speed, low latency camera for me to fly through. Those two things shouldn't be the same camera. And you're going to make compromises, as I had to, if you combine them into one camera. And I should also say that my editor, who did the color grading, agrees. He struggled and worked till his eyes were bleeding to get the best results he could possibly get out of the O3 footage, and said, please don't make me do this again. So if you're a color grader, you definitely want the GoPro, but you kind of probably already knew that. If you're interested in picking up this quadcopter or this naked GoPro 11, then there are links in the video description below to places where you can pick them up. And I do think the naked GoPro 11 is the star of this video. It is so much performance for such little weight, and the only downside is the price and the fact that it doesn't come with any kind of protection plan. So if you crash and break it, you're just out of luck. But those are the risks that you have to take if you want to get the best possible footage, I suppose. There are links to those down in the video description below, and they are affiliate links. And in case you're new here, that means that when you click that link and make any purchase at the affiliated vendor, I get a little commission. It's a very easy way for you to support the channel, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. Just find an affiliate link, click the link, and then do your shopping, whatever you're shopping for, and then feel good that you did your part to support the work that I'm doing here. The next video I think you should check out is the video where I took a GoPro apart and made a naked GoPro out of it all by myself. You can save a lot of money by taking an existing GoPro and buying a naked GoPro kit and doing the work yourself, but you got to be confident that you're not going to like just destroy your GoPro. So you probably want to see what it's like. It's not a Hero 11, but it is me making a naked GoPro. I'll put a card on screen for that. As well, you might want to check out my review of the Beta FPV Pavo Pico, an even smaller Cinewhoop that has just an O3 on board and doesn't even try to carry a GoPro. Cards on screen, links down below. I will see you there.